a Wikividi Documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Drew Peterson. Drew Walter Peterson is a convicted American murderer from Illinois who first received national publicity in 2007 when his fourth wife, Stacey Ann Carlisle Peterson, disappeared. Although law enforcement and the public suspected foul play, she has never been found, and Peterson has not been charged in her case. Suspicions in Stacey's case were fueled in part by the untimely death 3 years prior of Peterson's third wife, Kathleen Savio. A few months after their divorce, Savio was found dead in a dry bathtub in her home in 2004, with extensive bruises and a large gash in her scalp, now believed to be a stab wound. Initially, Savio's official cause of death was found to be accidental drowning. In 2009, Peterson was indicted for Savio's murder after a second autopsy showed evidence of a struggle. He was convicted of Savio's murder in 2012, and was sentenced to 38 years in prison on February 21, 2013. On February 9, 2015, Peterson was charged with 2 additional felonies, solicitation of murder and solicitation of murder for hire, for attempting to have Will County State's Attorney James Glasgow killed. He was convicted on May 31, 2016, and sentenced to an additional 40 years on July 29, 2016. On February 21, 2017, Peterson was transferred from Illinois Department of Corrections custody to the United States Penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. Early life. In 1972, Drew Peterson graduated from Willowbrook High School in Villa Park, Illinois, where he ran cross-country. He joined the U.S. Army after graduation and briefly attended the College of DuPage in 1974 before moving to Falls Church, Virginia, to train as a military police officer. Peterson had a 30-year career as a police officer. He began working with the local police force in Bolingbrook, Illinois in 1977. In 1978, he was assigned to the Metropolitan Area Narcotics Squad, and in 1979, he received a Police Officer of the Year award from the department. Carol Brown. Peterson and Carol Brown met in high school in Villa Park and together attended his senior prom. They married in 1974, but divorced in 1980, after Brown learned about his infidelity. Together they had sons Stephen Paul Peterson and Eric Drew Peterson. Vicki Connolly. Peterson married his second wife, Victoria Vicki Connolly, in 1982. The two operated a bar together in Romeoville. Connolly alleged a history of abuse during her 10-year marriage to Peterson, as has her daughter, who lived in the household until she turned 17. In the wake of Stacey Peterson's disappearance, Connolly told police that during their marriage, Peterson threatened to kill her and make it look like an accident. She divorced Peterson after he started dating Kathleen Savio. Their divorce was finalized on February 18, 1992. Peterson married Savio 2 months later. In 2007, Connolly stated that Peterson was a legend in his own mind. Kathleen Savio. Peterson married accountant Kathleen Savio on May 3, 1992. Together they had 2 sons, Thomas and Christopher. Their divorce was finalized on October 10, 2003. It was reported that between 2002 and 2004, police were called out to the Peterson house 18 times on domestic disturbance calls, including calls for returning children late after visitation. On March 1, 2004, Savio's body was found in a waterless bathtub. Her death was initially ruled an accidental drowning by a coroner's jury that included a police officer who personally knew Peterson and assured the other jurors that he was a good man who would never hurt his wife. However, following Stacey Peterson's later disappearance, Savio's body was exhumed and underwent forensic examination on November 16, 2007. Michael Barden, a former New York City medical examiner who conducted the examination at the request of Savio's relatives and Fox News, concluded that she died of drowning following a struggle when her body was placed in the bathtub. Post-mortem photos showed extensive bruising and scraping to her back, torso, and face, as well as a large, unexplained gash in her scalp, now believed to be a stab wound. Many believe these injuries were overlooked during the first autopsy. The results of the official autopsy ordered by the county have yet to be released to the public. Will County State's Attorney James Glasgow told the press that, after examining evidence in the case, he believed that the death was a homicide staged to look like an accident. On February 21, 2008, Glasgow announced that a pathologist had determined that Savio's death was a homicide, adding that the death had been investigated as such since reopening the case following the exhumation. Reverend Neil Schrei, a pastor at Stacey's church, reported that Stacey had told him that Drew had killed Savio and had made it look like an accident, and that she was afraid of her husband. Stacey had provided Drew's alibi for his whereabouts on the evening on which Savio died. Peterson's trial, proceeding in July 2012, was jeopardized when prosecutors attempted to introduce evidence that was not allowed. The Chicago Tribune reported that the judge would rule on a mistrial on August 2, 2012. On August 15, Peterson told a judge that he wanted to withdraw a request for a mistrial. His lawyers said that he wanted the current jury to decide if he killed his third wife. On September 6, Peterson was convicted of killing Savio. On February 21, 2013, he was denied a mistrial and sentenced to 38 years in prison. Stacey Ann Peterson. At age 49, Peterson married a 19-year-old hotel receptionist, Stacey Ann Carlos, on October 18, 2003, and she subsequently changed her last name to Peterson. Together they had 2 children, Anthony and Lacey. Stacey legally adopted Savio's children, and treated them like they were her own. She was close to completing her nursing degree from Joliet Junior College at the time of her disappearance on October 28, 2007. Stacey was officially reported missing in the early hours of October 29, after her sister, Cassandra Carlos, failed to hear from her when expected. Peterson claims that Stacey called him at 9 p.m. on Sunday to tell him that she had left him for another man, and that she had left her 2001 Ford Focus at Bolingbrook-Clough International Airport. Stacey is still considered a missing person. Her family has launched a website to help find her. Legal trouble. Several leads were followed in the investigation by Illinois State Police, with FBI involvement. 4 search warrants were issued and carried out on Peterson's property following Stacey's disappearance, including the seizure of his firearms in both his and Stacey's vehicles. Peterson announced his plans to retire as a Bolingbrook police sergeant effective December 2007. On November 15, the Bolingbrook Police Pension Board voted to allow Peterson to collect his pension of $6,067.71 per month, stating current law gave them no option, as he had not been convicted of a crime. Rick Mims, Peterson's longtime friend, admitted that he and Peterson bought 3 blue plastic containers from a cable company where they both worked part-time in 2003, and provided photos of these containers to police. Mims also sold his story to tabloid newspapers for an undisclosed sum of money. Peterson's stepbrother, Thomas Morphy, who has a history of drug and alcohol addiction, attempted suicide 2 days after allegedly helping Peterson carry a plastic container from Peterson's Bolingbrook home to his SUV, fearing he may have helped dispose of Stacey's body. Neighbors reported seeing Peterson and another man hauling a 55-gallon barrel, large enough to hold a person, out of the house shortly after the disappearance. Cassandra Carlos said she wanted Peterson to take a lie detector test about his knowledge of a blue container that she saw in his garage 2 days before Stacey disappeared. Joel Brodsky, Peterson's attorney, denied that any container was missing from Peterson's home. There were also reports of truckers referring to the containers, but their stories were treated as not credible after it was discovered that they had not been in the Bolingbrook area at the times they claimed. 2008 media appearances. On January 23, 2008, Peterson and his attorney, Joel Brodsky, called into show of Chicago radio personality Steve Dahl, who had been lampooning Peterson since the case began. Brodsky suggested that Dahl host an on-air dating game with Peterson the following day, but WJMK managers and Dahl decided not to go through with it. Peterson appeared on CNN's Larry King Live on April 11, 2008. With Brodsky again present to advise which questions Peterson should answer. The interview reran on May 9, 2009. 2 days after Peterson's arrest, Peterson subsequently made guest appearances on radio station WLS-AM with Manco Muller. After that radio appearance, Will County Judge Stephen White severely limited Peterson's access to the media. 2008 engagement to Christina Rains. In December 2008, Peterson's publicist Glenn Selleck confirmed Peterson was engaged to a 23-year-old Christina Rains. She would have been his fifth wife. On January 30, 2009, it was made public that Rains had moved out of Peterson's house. Her father, Ernie Rains, had issued an ultimatum to his daughter, because out of concern about the way Peterson tried to control her and what he feared Peterson could do. Rains moved out of Peterson's home when she came to her senses, calling the engagement a publicity stunt designed to keep Peterson in the media spotlight. 2009 indictment over Savio murder. On May 7, 2009, Peterson was indicted by a Will County grand jury and arrested for the murder of Savio. Bail was set at $20 million. In October 2009, Peterson sued J.P. Morgan Chase for revoking a home equity credit line that he wanted to use to pay legal expenses, claiming his income of nearly $109,000 per year was not sufficient. In July 2010, Judge White ruled that Peterson would remain in the Will County Jail for the remainder of his trial and appeals process. Prosecutors argued he could pose a danger if released. On July 21, 2010, it was revealed that hearsay statements indicating Peterson killed two of his wives were not reliable enough for a jury to hear at his trial. After presiding over a lengthy hearing, Judge White issued a 4-page sealed ruling in May obtained by the Daily Herald. White ruled that prosecutors proved Peterson killed both Savio and Stacy by a preponderance of the evidence, but nearly all statements attributed to Stacy do not provide sufficient safeguards of reliability. Stacy's statements were crucial to the prosecution's case, as it lacked significant direct evidence. In April 2012, an Illinois appellate court ruled that prosecutors could use 8 statements made by both the victim prior to her death and by Peterson's still missing fourth wife Stacy prior to her disappearance, reversing White's earlier decision. Peterson's defense had contended that introduction of these alleged hearsay comments constituted a violation of his Sixth Amendment right to confront any witnesses testifying against him. The Illinois state legislature attempted to help the prosecution with the passage of a new Illinois law, 725 ILCS 5115-10.6, or Drew's Law, which allows prosecutors to enter hearsay statements into evidence under certain conditions, passed while investigators were looking for Stacy. The legislation permits courts to consider statements from unavailable witnesses, provided that prosecutors are able to prove that the witness was killed to prevent his or her testimony and that the hearsay statements are reliable. Analysis by the trial court under this new law led to 8 out of 14 hearsay statements being ruled inadmissible, because they were insufficiently reliable. On appeal, however, the Court of Appeals reversed the trial court, ruling that the common law doctrine of forfeiture by wrongdoing, which is less restrictive than Drew's Law, would allow the statements to be admitted. On August 22, 2012, Jeff Pachter, a witness at Peterson's murder trial, says Peterson offered him $25,000 to hire someone to kill Savio and told him it would be a secret he would take to his grave. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?